when we speak about Aritzia, Sara and I, we are in HR, and what that means is we're covering the scope of corporate, so the traditional support office jobs, but also distribution center, call center, retail stores, and we also have a photo studio downstairs. So we have actually a quite large and a big mix of talent that we deal with on a day-to-day. And so hopefully one of those groups you guys can identify with, and certainly at the end we'll have questions, or you guys will have questions for us. So I just talked about, we're just going to go through a little bit about us, and then we'll talk about our HR department and our people philosophies. And then we'll actually walk you guys through some of the key guiding principles that we practice on a day-to-day that we feel have made us very successful at Aritzia. So Sara, I'm going to let you start.
Great. So Aritzia, our vision is very simple, yet lofty. We want to be the premier fashion destination for young women in North America. Not complicated. We want everybody to shop with us. That's our goal as an organization. We do have more than 60 stores in Canada and the US, which is very exciting for us. Recently launched our e-commerce business, which is a whole new channel for us. We know how to open stores, sell clothes, and make money. We didn't know how to do that online. I would say we didn't. We're still learning to. We've launched ourselves successful, but a long road ahead of opportunity there. So that's a new element to our business that we've recently taken on. Our culture. People ask us to describe our culture. It's, to articulate it the best way I can, we are creative people. Our creativity is the number one value in our organization, be it creative output from a product standpoint or creative problem solving. And I think it's the interesting, trying to strike the perfect balance between creativity and discipline. So the whole entrepreneurial piece, yet being structured and process oriented to support what you need to do as a business. So I say 100 times a day, I have to make decisions about when to be methodical. I mean, I should always be methodical, but when to be sort of slow and disciplined, and when to be quick and entrepreneurial. And that happens hundreds of times a day with every decision we make. So as an organization, that's something we're always trying to strike the balance between. And I like that because we're at a size where we're not a small company anymore. However, we like to say we're anti-bureaucracy. We want a shortest distance from A to B is a straight line, so let's take that straight line whenever we can. And so that kind of flexibility feeds into, I think, part of what makes us successful.
I think I want to, some color I wanted to paint is that Aritzia has been around for 30 years. And so, we are established, but yet we're still growing in areas. So Sara mentioned e-commerce. And so one of our challenges and sort of our pain points was that we're a highly successful retail organization. And when we launched e-commerce, we were doing it like we were a small business growing it. So we started with one person as a project manager. We did probably what you guys are familiar with. We just Googled, we researched. We wanted to figure out, what do other organizations do? And so although, we were already established as an organization, when we launch different initiatives, we start like we are entrepreneurs. And that's the great thing about Aritzia, because it allows for opportunity for our existing people. We don't just go out and hire $500 an hour consultants to come in and set things up and do it for us. We actually treat it like we're starting our own business again from scratch to make sure that it's authentic to Aritzia. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, share with you guys a little bit about our HR department and sort of our people philosophies. So one thing that we really stand by is that what we think is important at Aritzia is that our HR people, we want them to be business people first. And so how we stand by that is actually, I don't know if you guys read Sara and my background, but I've only been practicing HR for 2 years. So I've been with Aritzia for 8 years. I started off as a project manager, and through that I worked in a department, essentially was considered like the internal consulting group. And so I was just working on different projects across the organization. And so 2 years ago, I made a personal decision, but also is the right decision for the business at the time to move into the role of HR. And the idea was that we're bringing business people into the department because the business people know what the business needs are best. And therefore, we understand what performance truly looks like. We understand what the right fit is, and that we can actually help and partner with the business better because we actually understand. So when our CFO comes to us and says, this financial analyst isn't performing, we actually know what that looks like. We understand that their business model is not a 10 out of 10 versus this business model is like a 5 out of 10. And I think that's quite different. And I will admit that there are various HR people who've gone through our organizations. We've had some turnover, and it's because they didn't quite fit that model where they were an HR practitioner first rather than a business person first. And so that's truly important and fundamental at Aritzia, where we basically have the talent managers sit with the business instead of sitting in the HR department, so that every executive has a financial analyst, an HR person, and what we call an operations person. So that's like the dream team, and that's the support. And the idea is that the HR person can take the staff management piece from the business person, so that we can make all the decisions for them if they weren't in the room. And that's the blue sky, that's our vision, but it's a very different model than a lot of other organizations.
And bouncing off of that, building off of that, we believe in specializing. So we say plumbers do the plumbing. So in order to make sure that we can hire the best financial analyst possible, that's not a good example, even if I say a creative director for a line. So our head designer, who's a creative director, they're responsible for a line and they're also responsible for managing a team. If I can hire a creative director that is a 9 out of 10 creative and a 2 out of 10 at people management, or I can hire a 7 out of 10 creative, 9 out of 10 people management, every single day I'll hire the 9 creative and the 2 at people management. Because what I'll do is mitigate that with someone else. Because if I hire the 7 out of 10 creative, that's the best creative I'll ever get. So we don't believe in sort of getting the middle of the road, well-rounded at everything. We believe in getting kick-ass at the thing is whatever it is we're hiring for, and then supporting that or any weaknesses in an individual and mitigating that with somebody else.
So aligned to that is our people philosophy. So, I think one of the greatest things about Aritzia is that we manage by exception. And so a lot of HR practitioners cringe as soon as they hear that. But for us, it works great. And what this means is that we recognize every individual is different and that every individual will be motivated by different things. And therefore, at Aritzia, we don't have salary bands. We ask people, what is it that motivates you? What do you want? And it can be different. It could be hours of work. It could be remuneration. It could be title, it could be having an office or a parking pass, right? And so that's what we do. We understand that every individual is different and that they're motivated. So to be able to drive performance to the ultimate, to the peak, what is it that we need to do? And so this, obviously creates more work for the HR department, but this is how we can truly partner with the business and say, tell us what you want, what are your business objectives, and then we can come up with customized programs or one-offs in order to meet that objective. This is very different, again, typically from other organizations, and this is something that Aritzia has the luxury of doing. Perhaps, when we get to be a Fortune 500 company, maybe we can't follow this model anymore. But for now, this is what has truly made Aritzia successful. And it also allows us to be able to attract and retain what we think are the best to the best. Because we'll have people who come to us and they'll say, that's great, you had this job offer for us, but there's another offer on the table that's exactly the same. What's going to be different? And so by allowing us in HR to be able to customize the packages, and this allows us to be able to, retain those employees.
The next session we wanted to talk about were guiding principles. So we use that term at Aritzia. It's sort of a high-level how. So guiding principles should be, again, the philosophies that you would employ at any time to help make decisions. And that's because we have people making these decisions across our whole organization. We have thousands of people that work in our stores across all geographies. So we have to make sure that whatever we're doing, we have alignment from a philosophical standpoint. So we were going to talk through hiring, remunerating, evaluating, promoting, and terminating. So I think what we could do is just give a quick overview on each of those. And then if you want to hammer questions in any one of those, we can feel free, because some of those might be more important to you than others. Does that sound okay? So from a hiring standpoint, the biggest factor for me when hiring talent to the organization is, number one, really knowing what you need when you start out. The biggest, and this is the biggest challenge always, because you're in growing organizations, but to try and be as clear as possible and be able to articulate what it is you want, and then prioritizing what it is. I always say it's like finding an apartment. You have your wish list, but you have to prioritize what are non-negotiables for you and what things you'd like to have, but that you could live without. So that when you look for talent, you can be as objective as possible, measuring them against that criteria. I can't tell you how many times I sit down in a room with a bunch of people who have interviewed someone and they're like, someone launches into what they really like about the person, someone else is focused on something else that's a weakness, and you have to bring everybody back to what are the competencies that we're looking for in this person? How do you rate them out of 10 in each of these competencies? And it becomes a much more objective exercise within a very subjective area of decision making, because really you're making a decision based on the information you have in front of you when you're interviewing and hiring someone. But to try and stay as objective as possible is to me the best way to ensure for hiring the right talent. Fit within the culture of the organization is just a non-negotiable. And I know when I've made decisions based on external pressures, so time pressure, I'm sure you all have positions, you need help, and it's like, if I could get a warm body, I know it might not be, I feel it in this area, that it's not the exact right person, but I need this help really badly. There are times when you have to do that, but if you can hold out and find the person that is ultimately the right who, we all know that that's going to serve you better in the long run. And so I guess my advice would be not to be shy about, or not to feel that weighting personality and fit within the culture and within your team weigh that far above what someone has already done. So for us at Aritzia, one of the things I love is I have a non-traditional background. I was saying to CT, they're going to ask me HR questions, and I'm not really an HR person. What will I do? So essentially, I came from our business too and have grown through different roles in the organization. But that's why I'm very comfortable with a non-traditional approach. So I'll interview someone who thinks they're X, and I'm like, you're so Y here. You'd be so good over here. And they might not have thought of that, but what I look for is talent, and I look for culture fit within the organization. And then I figure out how to get that person on board in the right seat. And I don't worry so much about whether they've done that job 6 different places. To me, that isn't necessarily a predictor of success. So I guess I would encourage you to be creative and open-minded with, I'm just like staring at these sour keys that just sat down. I was like, everybody's eyes are like, zoop. My Instagram handle is Sugar is my friend, so apparently you knew that.
We'll bring it closer.
Yes, but not right now, not right now. But essentially to not be shy about considering someone's fit over someone's experience within your industry or within the function that you're hiring for. Be open-minded about it, because the right who, getting them in place is going to serve you far better. Of course, technical skills are required for some positions. I couldn't be a CFO, but I always say I could be a lot of other things because I'm moldable, I'm smart, hardworking, I can learn. So you want people like that within your company. It's a really good question, and it brings up another point that I want to make. So number one is we hire. Geographic boundaries do not exist in my world. I'm like, give me the problem of the most wicked person that lives in who knows where, has 18 cats and a family, and we have to relocate them, but they're perfect for the job. I'm like, I'll take it. I'll take that problem. So we look everywhere for talent. I think you raise another good point, which is we believe our stores are our internship program. We have amazing people working within our business. I started as a salesperson and worked my way up in the company. So if we are going to have entry-level positions, we want to bring internal people wherever possible. But we also say, if I just had to hire someone for today, it'd be a lot easier. But I say I'm not allowed to hire someone unless they can, within a year to 2 years, take on more. So part of that is there could be someone who could fit it for today, but are they someone who you believe can be more? And if they can't, I would hesitate because you're going to outgrow them and they might not even serve the immediate purpose, I guess. And then secondly, if we're bringing someone in from outside our organization, they better bring a level of experience and expertise, skills, whatever it is, that we can't find within. So it's, if you're hiring junior, hire for potential. And if you're hiring senior, hire for experience would be how we look at it.
Can I interject a question?
Yeah.
You were talking about the 9 out of 10 on the one, and then
yes.
there are 2 on the other, and support. If you're a smaller business, obviously everybody on this table is smaller
yes.
than Aritzia, and some much smaller. So it's a bit of a spectrum, and you don't have that luxury of then hiring the other. Let's say really budget-wise, whatever, you can do the one.
Yeah.
Do you, in those cases, do you think it's okay to hire the 7? Like, how would you approach that if you were that entrepreneur in that position?
I think that's a really good question. Thankfully, I don't have to face that every day, but I know you do. And so what I would say is, again, prioritize. So what is the most critical thing you're trying to fill?
The non-negotiables.
The non-negotiables, and go for that. And we have a rating scale, and 7 to us is good, great, excellent, extraordinary for 8, 9, 10. You know, if someone isn't at least an 8 and above in the areas that are critical to that position, I would hold myself back from hiring them. And I would allow the nices or the things that would be so great to have in that person, I would allow those to sit to the side. So in that situation, I would hire the 9 because the designer is the primary role I'm hiring for. Whether she can manage people is great, but not core to the role. So my example would be, you're hiring a creative person, go for the 9 out of 10 creative.
And I think each of you guys know in your own areas and industries what your core competencies are and what your differentiators are. And so those are all unique to your organization. At Aritzia, for us, it's creativity. So we see ourselves not as a retailer, but as a creative organization, as like a fashion company. And so therefore, the designer is the heart and soul of our organization. And this is where that's the non-negotiable, is that in order for us to be successful, it is like the bread and butter of our organization. They need to be a 10 out of 10 designer, or else nothing else matters at the end of the day.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll answer those in two parts. And what I would say is, when I took on this role, it was almost 2 years ago now. After a little while, I was meeting with our CEO and COO, and I said, just so you know, the more people I meet, the more I realize how awesome I am and how valuable I am to you. And they're like, yeah, okay, I guess so. I'm like, because it's hard to find awesome people. You think you're awesome, therefore everyone else is awesome, but they're not. So, yes, I think part of it is the seeming awesome at the beginning in the first few weeks. So how can you get as realistic a picture of someone as possible before pulling the trigger? So what assessment criteria can you use? So actually I'll back up, because chronologically, how are you going to go about finding these people? Best people I find are just through referrals. So the posting and praying kind of thing, I'm like, the best people have jobs. They're not wandering around looking for jobs. So, and if you post, to me, out of respect, you want to respond to people, you want to engage with them, and you probably don't have time to do that. So before even doing that, it's number one, identify the role, identify the non-negotiable characteristics and competencies of someone you want to fill that role. Then it's, who do I know? And be open-minded in terms of industry. It doesn't, like you said, awesome can be anywhere. So think of people, and I say A players, like attracts like. A players want to work with other A players. So who do you know that's awesome, that you meet through your networking, and how can you get that group how can you leverage them to help you find people? And I think being as clear as possible in what it is you're looking for supports that and allows other people to help you. But the number one thing I would say is source through people you know. And then number 2 is LinkedIn is the best resource. It depends on the type of role you're looking to fill, but LinkedIn is this, it's this excellent tool that at least provides you with sort of like boundless access to talent. You won't necessarily want someone who's in the UK, but like you can hone your searches and really find out good possible who's through that. But like unequivocally, referrals are the best way. Yeah. And then secondly, orientation. I can let CT talk to that.
Yes. Before I go in orientation, I do want to say, and we keep going back to culture, and the reason why is that at Aritzia, and I know a lot of organizations, and probably similar with yours, is that culture is such a big fundamental, it's like it's a non-negotiable for us. And so that's why the referrals help so much, because there's already that first initial culture screen. And so at other organizations, the typical, there's a war for talent. Everyone knows that. It's in every article that you see. We know it's hard to find good people. And at other organizations, I could tell you they do the standard, which is like transcripts, university degree. Like if you went to Harvard, Wharton, all those schools and Ivy League schools, that's like the first filter. At Aritzia, we value potential and culture fit. And so those traditional methods don't necessarily work for us. And this is why, we do struggle, and we find our own ways of finding what we think is a culture fit or people with high potential. So things that we typically look at, at the retail level or the distribution center level that are more junior, is like extracurricular activities, like how motivated are these people? And that demonstrates whether they can multitask or not. Are they working part-time right now and they're going to school? Are they a competitive athlete? Those are some indicators for us that kind of say, okay, hey, they may be a good culture fit because at Aritzia, we're passionate, we're hardworking, we drive for excellence. So the traditional ways don't always work for Aritzia. And so that's, hopefully that's comforting for you guys where, you guys don't all need to go out and hire Harvard MBAs. Because that doesn't always work for us either.
It's a really good point. It made me remember one of the things we started doing a year ago for our retail side, and we should probably move to this at corporate at some point, but we decided what are the things you need to predict success in someone entry level. So when I went in, I had never sold a thing in my life, but I ended up becoming a good salesperson. So to me, it's your personality, it's your hustle, it's your energy, it's all those things, your smarts, your common sense. So you can't find any of those things from a resume. You're like, I can't figure that out. So what we decided to do is invite every single person who applies to meet us in person. So of course that's labor intensive and not everybody's going to be able to do that. But from a philosophical standpoint, it allows us to try and find awesome that doesn't show up on a piece of paper. So that's another way of not posting it out to the world and then you got 1,000 people you're trying to meet. But if someone refers somebody good to you, meet them in person would be my recommendation. And even if you can do a quick phone call to get a sense of them as an individual to try and maximize your time. But number one, I would say try to meet people over a piece of paper. And then the second thing would be try not to delegate hiring. Try to do it yourself. Try to make, it's the most important decision you'll make. And sometimes people think, because it is, it's a task to interview people, but if you pass that off to someone else, there's an inherent risk in that. So anyways.
I would say something similar, if I could relate it, is our distribution center. It's very hard for us to find distribution associates that are awesome. Typically, people post on Craigslist, and I think we're pretty awesome. I wouldn't look on Craigslist for a career. And so it's hard to find people who are going to be awesome, have potential, but are okay doing distribution center jobs, which is packing boxes, picking, etc. And so what we're trying to paint now, what we're doing now is actually we're looking at it more strategically. How do we paint the opportunity? So we actually want to attract university graduates as well. And so how do we say to them, go into this role today, but tomorrow, this is what your opportunity will be. And so we're not going to pay someone $30 an hour to work at the distribution center. Unfortunately, it is still $15 an hour. And most people say to me, well, I'd rather work at the bank. It's more glorious. I get to look nice, have neat nails, and I'm getting paid $19 an hour. And what we can say to them is, and so again, we have the luxury at Aritzia, which is we value smarts and potential and culture fit. And so come and work for us. This is an opportunity, it's in a pipeline, and what we think is if you knock this job out of the park, 6 months, a year, there's no timeline. We don't say it has to be 2 years. Come in, work for us, and actually you could be the distribution center manager a year from now if they have the potential. There's no stopping you to being the director, the VP, and we can truly stand by and speak to it. Because like myself, I came in to Aritzia from university, I started as a project manager. I've had the fortunate opportunity to work in all different departments. I helped set up the legal department. I worked on e-commerce. I worked on USA expansion. And then when I said, I want to do HR, they put me in HR. And so what I guess I'm trying to say is I totally understand your pain point because we have similar issues as well, different but similar. And I think what we're trying to do is partner with schools where we go to now supply chain, schools with supply chain majors. Whether it's BCIT or UBC, we're looking at different organizations where we can actually get in there early and we can say to them, this is Aritzia, this is why we're great, but if you start at this level while you're young and high potential, this is where you can get to a year from now, 2 years from now. And maybe you won't be in supply chain for the rest of your life, we get that, but this is your stepping stone to be the CEO because we actually have real life examples in our organization where that has happened.
I think the other thing, if I were in your shoes, I would sit down and say, okay, so what is my employer brand? There's my consumer brand, but what's my employer brand? What do I want to be known for? What do I want people to work here to exude? What do I want the consistent values to be within my company? And then define that. And then think about what makes you different. Because your thing is a differentiator. You have to differentiate yourself, and you have differentiators that aren't necessarily assets. Maybe location is a challenge, but you'll have differentiators that are assets, right? So I think there's that, defining that. And then I kind of have this no stone unturned philosophy we call front to back, top to bottom, left to right. So if you can envision everybody that is qualified, so if you can get a list, figure out how to get a list of everybody that has the qualifications, because you have very specific qualifications, and know who that landscape of who is. That's the landscape of possibility. Then what's your differentiator? What's your employer brand? Who are all the possible people? And there are going to be people who are on the younger end, the up and coming end, that would take that as an opportunity. We say remuneration is wage education opportunity. That's what CT is speaking to. So it's not just your base pay, it's your education opportunity. I call it exposure to leadership. So how can you help someone be better? They can get that from you, probably working more directly with you, or for potentially a smaller organization, than they can being a cog in a massive business. So fine, go work at a bank, but you're one of a million people, or come work here and look what exposure you're going to get. I always say I would be, I'd be the receptionist if it would give me the exposure that I need to grow my career. So you're going to have people that have that mindset. So I guess, like I said, differentiator, employer brand, who are you? What are your differentiators within that? The landscape of possible who's, and then just start to kind of chip away at that. Sorry, are you asking in terms of like remuneration? What motivates them, or are you asking all of it?
So, I mean, at Hire, it's more straightforward. It really largely is due to remuneration, but we do ask them, what is it going to take to get you here in the door? Tell us what it's going to take. Most people, it's about remuneration. Or they don't know, actually, they're not even aware that they can ask for different things. Yeah. But most times it's just, this is what I want as my base pay. Others who are more experienced will say, I would like to work part-time. Sorry, the money doesn't matter to me, or I need this title. So, from a talent management perspective, so that falls onto my team on a day-to-day. In our formalized process, we do the very similar step as we do at hiring once a year when we do evaluations. We do evaluations and remuneration. It's two separate processes, but we literally ask the individuals. We like to call it gathering our facts. We say to the individual, this is what you're currently making right now, and we have a summary sheet, which is essentially it's your opportunity, the education that you've experienced over the year, and also your remuneration, your base pay, which equals your total remuneration. What is it that you want, or that you feel that you deserve or you warrant based on your performance evaluation that we just had? And most employees, especially those ones who are brand new, and even the managers, they're actually quite surprised that we even ask that question. And we formalize it so that we give everyone a piece of paper, you fill in the box, and you tell us, what is it that you need? Some people don't fill it out, and we actually go back to them and say, hey, why didn't you fill this out? Is it because you're happy? And most people say, yeah, I'm happy if they didn't fill it out. Or they might say, I don't even know how to fill this out because no one's ever asked, right? Because most times in other organizations, it's, hey, you got $1 raise. And you're like, oh, great, that was a nice surprise. For us, we think, well, why don't you just ask? Because some people, the dollar means everything to them. Some people will be, I was expecting $2, so that $1, great, that doesn't mean anything to me. And some people will say, you know what, I've been working late nights. I just want to take a couple days off because I want to spend it with my family or my kids. I want to go on vacation with them. And so it's quite interesting, and it is a very arduous process to go through. We do this mostly at our corporates, like 500 employees, to go through this process. But that's what's interesting, I guess, about us, is that we reach out and we say, once a year formally, here's what you can communicate back to us as to what motivates you. Now, on a day-to-day, this is more difficult. This is where we want the talent managers, the HR team, to come in and work and partner with the business, so the actual department managers. So this is where we as HR people, are in the business, and we should know the individual so well that we should actually be able to do the performance evaluation. So that's our vision. And so I would know Sara very well, where actually I could go to her boss and say, hey, I know she didn't put anything in her Remun sheet, or I've noticed she's been down the last couple of weeks. This is what I think. Or hey, she knocked it out of the park on that presentation. This is what I think we should do, because I know her that well. No, we shouldn't give her a bonus. I think we should actually get her a gift certificate to the spa, because I think she'd really like that. And so that's our job in HR, is to be the arms and legs and the eyes and ears for our department managers. with the assumption now of the premise that our model is specialization. So the managers are busy driving sales, running the business, and so then we become sort of the people managers.
And just to back up at the time of hire, one of the things I do is I say, okay, there's what you do, where you do it, who you do it for, and how much you make. So I can tell you what order is important to me. What I do is not important to me. I've had 6 different roles at Aritzia. I hope to have a few more. So my what is not that important. My where I work, so the company and the culture is so important to me. And actually the product, I want to be passionate. If we're selling tires, I'm not that excited. I love fashion, so that's a big draw for me. There's who I work with. So I work with the smart, I believe, are the smartest people. I have to be, it makes me better. I align it to, I have a sports background, so you play up to the players you're playing with and you play down to the players you're playing with. So so where I work, who I work with, what I do, and the how much to me has always just fallen in line, fortunately enough, so I don't prioritize that. And I say to the person, okay, order, you're looking at your next career opportunity, put in order what's most important to you. And through that discussion, you'll often find, okay, you can hear balance of work-life balance. I hate that term because it's so nebulous, but anyway, that might be important to someone. Pay opportunity for growth is often most important. So then through that discussion and listening to them speak, you can then say, okay, so what I've heard you say is X, Y, Z, and then you can help create, if that's the person you want to hire, create a package where you can paint the picture of that opportunity. So not just, I'm going to hire you for this job at this pay, sign on the dotted line. It's like, okay, let's start here. And I know you want to be here, and guess what? That's up for grabs, but I want to start you here doing this, and let's have like specific check-ins, commit to what you're going to do to help the person get where it is they want to go. But I find it's through the discussion when you're actually interviewing someone and getting to know them, you can figure out what makes them tick and then tailor something to them.
You're talking about meeting with everybody that puts in a resume, which obviously can take a lot of time. What are your thoughts on group interviews? Do you do them? Do you recommend
Well, that's a
them?
really good question again. My short answer is it depends for what role. It's funny. Oh yeah. Okay, I won't say that. It depends for what role. For a more entry-level position, I think it can be a really good way to get a general assessment. So, for example, what we do in stores sometimes is we have meet and greet. So every Tuesday between 6 and 7, come to the TNA store on Robson. And what we do is we don't treat it like an interview. We tell them about Aritzia. We tell them about our career paths. We answer any questions they might have. And through that, you're going to kind of find who could be a good fit for you, and then you can approach them. So you can do it in a way where it's not actually an assessment. I feel kind of funny assessing people in that kind of scenario. It feels a bit weird to me, but you can achieve that objective with a different spin on it. And I would say that the other thing we've done that has been successful, so at one point, our CEO came to me and said, how many people apply a month that have an MBA in anything? I want you to meet, Sara, you personally have to meet every single person that has an MBA that applies to us. So I called it the MBA Blitz. And so the first Friday of the month, I got someone to schedule back to back to back to back to back. And I literally told people, this is a 15-minute just introduction. I just want to get a sense of you, you get a sense of us. And then if there's something now, great. And if there isn't, we've gotten the introduction. So I call it the Blitz, and you set the expectation up front with what will happen and how long it will take, and then you back to back to back them. So I would say the first can be good for more entry-level positions, and the latter could be good for as senior of a position as you're looking for.
Right. Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, cool. I mean, the number one thing I would say, that's so interesting, I wouldn't know any of those things. No, for real. Well, I don't have children now, but I also wouldn't know any of those things. So what I would suggest is, what is your value proposition? So exactly what you said, make it a business case. So did you know that this many, like bite-sized information, but enough that would make me go, wow, I didn't realize I could be losing money because of this, or I could be losing employee effectiveness because of this. So what that would be the thing that would get my attention. And so then what can you do to help mitigate that? So very simply, why a business would even want to speak to you, articulate that, and then make the why, because I get people, we get people calling all the time, and mostly, I send a very polite response, but we don't want to solicit external contractors, not really what we do. So, but if you send something that is going to tell me why I'm losing money or losing effectiveness, I'm going to pay attention. And we're a company of 400 50 majority women at our corporate office, like that would be of interest to me. So the why factor to get my attention, and then make it really easy, which is have a 15-minute phone call. Can we have a 15-minute phone call where I can just quickly make an introduction? And so that makes it more palatable to say yes to get that sort of first stage going.
Having friends. So we talked about remunerating, and just quickly is that our belief is, I already talked about we don't have salary bands, but we believe in remunerating, overpaying essentially our top performers. So that way, if they're awesome, they'll stay with us, and that's how we can retain them. And basically what we want to do is just take money off the table. We don't want anyone leaving us because of money. And also in turn, then what we say is overpay the top performers, underpay the bottom performers will self-select themselves out. So that's pretty much our philosophy on remunerating.
In reflecting on you and understanding a little bit more about your businesses, I think now I feel less awesome. I think I am able to be awesome because I'm in an organization that has the means to be able to do these wonderful things. So I'm like, oh, okay, sitting a little bit more slouched than I was when I came in. But what I would say is, often what I see is remuneration being seen as a short-sighted, organizations looking at it from a short-sighted perspective. So you know how valuable an awesome person is to your business because you don't have hundreds of people in your business. And so to lose somebody over a relatively small amount of money versus the soft and hard costs of replacing someone, it's like you have to weigh out all of those factors. And someone like CT is saying, taking money off the table is a factor, meaning get them in for what is going to motivate them. And I don't wake up ever thinking about my pay. I wake up thinking about my job. I go to sleep thinking about my job, and I'm excited to get in there. And I never think about how much money I make, and I don't look at my pay stub because it's a non-factor for me. So I feel like it's taken care of, and I can focus on work. And so to treat the pay of people when you bring them on in that way, for us, yields the best result. I know it's easier to say than do when you don't have limitless resources.
Evaluating.
Oh. Don't sit on the fence. Evaluating, one of the things we like to talk about is triangulating facts. So we talk about facts quite a bit. So in order to make a good decision, first thing you need are your facts. So when we talk about triangulating facts, there's seeing it for yourself, there's reviewing reports, and there's getting feedback from others. If you do all those three things, you're going to have about as many facts as are reasonable to help guide you in your decision making. And so I would say face those facts. Triangulate them and then face them. And when you're evaluating someone, number one, if they're awesome, tell them they're awesome. I can't tell you how many times I leave a meeting. Anytime I leave a meeting and someone is mentioned in a positive light, I go find them. And I'm like, I was just in a meeting with the CEO, whoever, and he was saying how awesome you are. And they're like, I'm awesome? I'm like, yeah, you're awesome. People have the evaluating connotation of like when people are falling off. So number one, if people are awesome, tell them they're awesome. Don't assume that they know. And if people are falling down, the be direct and be tangible about it is, I can't tell you again how many times someone will leave a conversation and the leader will say to me, oh, it went super well. We were talking about this yesterday, and then the employee will come and say what they thought happened. I'm like, were you people in the same room? Because it doesn't seem like you were. So to be clear on the facts and then articulate about the person, both in their strengths and opportunities, and to take a stand and be clear on it. Whether that means someone is going to be promoted, whether they're going to get a raise, whether it means they're maybe not performing and could potentially end up exiting, be clear about it and be direct.
Promoting, we touched up a little bit about this already, but because culture fit is so important and crucial to our organization, we always try to promote from within. We're trying to establish sort of a structure and a program that we can formalize this. Whether it's like a development program or like an Aritzia University, where we actually take people from the juniors from our stores or distribution center and bring them into the office. Because we've found that the majority of time when people are successful, it is because they are a culture fit, meaning they are passionate, they're creative, they are entrepreneurial, and they want to be here. That's what matters to us. So this is something that we're working towards. And I mean, again, Sara and I, we're part of this model, and it's, for us, it's been great. It's been the opportunity that, we couldn't have asked for anywhere else.
Really quickly on terminating, if someone resigns and you're fine with it, it means you probably should have terminated them already. That's easy to say and not easy to do because you're running off your feet already and you don't have time to stop and replace that person necessarily. But I think the idea is if someone isn't working out from your perspective, you can control the timing or they can control the timing. But it feels like the end would be inevitable. I encourage you to control the timing wherever possible. So if you have to let someone go, if make a decision, stick with it. And if you have to let someone go, of course, in the most respectful manner possible and paying the appropriate severance to mitigate their gap in employment, like you can treat someone very, very well in exiting them from the organization or from your company. And sometimes that's just what you need to do. And you'd be amazed both, and I'm not going to pretend you're doing them a favor, but sometimes if someone's not a fit, you're setting them up to take on their next endeavor and you're freeing yourself up. And I see every empty seat as this precious opportunity to bring someone awesome, wicked, perfect to your company. And so if someone isn't that and you know that, again, I would encourage you to be proactive about releasing them if you come to that.
And there's never going to be a good time whenever we have these termination discussions with our managers.
1,000 reasons.
Yes, there's always a million excuses. So of course we shouldn't do it on Christmas or on their birthday, but there will always be a reason. And so this is why we encourage you guys to be proactive about it, identify the people who aren't the right fit or the bottom performers, and address anything that you need to with the severance.
The conversation should be very short and very direct. So we're sitting down to have an unfortunate conversation, which is, I'm not going to be able to continue with your employment effective today. Like, get it out of the way what you're actually saying, and then have a plan whereby you're happy to walk them to get their purse and walk them out to the car. Do you want to get a taxi? I'll call you a taxi, so that there's a plan in terms of the movement versus you're held hostage in your office. And then it can be, okay, you tell someone in advance, come in 15 minutes and grab me and knock on the door and say, oh, you're not, and so that you can say, I'm so sorry, happy to answer any questions you have after reflecting on this. At this point, I just want you to get home. There's a lot of information to take in. I'm just going to give you some time and space. So kind of like pre-plan the like.
Okay.
So we should always have, a witness in the conversation. So two people and the employee. That's the ideal. And at Aritzia, what we do is we have the manager and the HR person sit in the meeting. We have the manager deliver the news about the decision, but then the manager leaves immediately after. And we let the HR person facilitate the logistics. And that way, there's no questioning. So if an employee has any questions, the manager's not in a position where they feel that they need to answer, to stay, to console. And any questions that the employee has, it's purely on the logistics of the termination and not about why. So that kind of removes that out of the picture, because even if they asked why, the HR person could say, well, sorry, I don't know, but we can get back to you. Let's work on the facilitation of this right now.
Keep saying delegate it, don't do it
Yeah.
yourself.
And it just kind of removes that out of the
It's hard with
picture.
small businesses, right? And the smaller
Absolutely.
the company, there may not be the witness.
Totally.
And
Yes.
bring in a friend.
Well, and the witness is blue sky, but it's not mission critical to have a witness. That's good practice, but you don't have to have that. But I think most importantly is pre-planned how to even start the convo, because sometimes you'll sit there and you're like, because that's not an easy, so it's like, what are you actually going to say as your first two lines to the person, and pre-plan all those components as
And I
best you
think
can.
people tend to, over communicate at this point, where literally is what Sara said. There's two lines that need to be said. Just unfortunately your employment is ending today. Today's your last day. That's really the nuts and bolts of the message. And what managers get into the trap of is they go into reasons why, and I'm sorry, and I know this isn't a good time, and I'm sorry, and we've tried to make it work, and I know this and I know that, and it's like, we have to, in HR, we tell the managers, you say these two lines and then you stand up. That's like, we actually have to tell the managers to stand up, because if they stay seated and the employee is talking and asking, and reasonably so, everyone feels compelled to stay. And so we actually train them to say, stand up, because that motions that you will be exiting the room.
How often do you ever pay more than the minimum severance required?
A great question.
So we, it's all case by case. So again, when we manage by exception,
Right.
in the life cycle of an employee. It depends on the various factors. So the risk and length of service of the employee and the reasons why.
I think one of the biggest challenges with the minimum is there for an entry-level position. Case law is what dictates what you should really be paying in severance. So there's no hard and fast rule about what the right thing is to do, because the guidelines of labor standards are for entry-level positions. And the whole purpose of severance is to mitigate someone's gap in employment. So that's why the factor of their age, are they specialized in what they do? Are there other positions in proximity that they could be taking? So you have to take into consideration a whole bunch of factors, but the labor standards is really meant to be the bare minimum, and for someone who's in a position that can be easily replaced. So we tend to pay over and above the basics.
It depends on the role and all the factors that we have to consider, but we actually look at each individual when the situation comes, and there is a meeting where we actually go through and we say, this is what the minimum is and whether we will or not. So I will, just use an example, for DC associates, we may not, whereas the probability of us doing it for a finance manager, we may. The other thing is, what I should share with you guys, is that at Aritzia, we actually have employment contracts. And some organizations do and some don't. And so we do put the termination and the severance in a clause in the contract. So whatever it has to be at least the minimum, of course. But whatever our termination clause is, we feel that it's, we're pretty protected because of that. Because upon, entering into the agreement at employment, both sides have agreed that this is what your exit package will look like.
And if you do pay over and above, that's an opportunity for a release and exchange, because a release, can protect you from them soliciting other employees, from disparagement, from confidential, all those things. So if you do go over and above, ensure that there's consideration on your end, meaning what are you getting from that, as well as being fair to the employee. Well, and what you can do really quickly, it doesn't have to be monetary. You can say it's easier to find a job when you have a job. So I'm going to give you working notice. If that person won't be damaging to your business and you feel like they can manage that. Or sometimes I find people like choice. In a situation like that where you're not in control, you're being let go, that's very emotionally difficult. But if you say, okay, you can take 1 week pay, or you can take, a week working and a week pay, what would you like to do? Someone might just say, you know what, I'm just going to call it a day. And some people say, okay, thanks, that gives me a bit of space. So you can look at it creatively and not just base it purely on cash.
The other thing is sorry, can I just jump in, is that there are multiple objectives in a termination. So one is you want to minimize risk, which is where the bare minimum, employment standards comes in. But the other objective is, we want to protect our brand, and we also want to not disrupt the business. So those are some considerations that you may want to apply when you're factoring how much above and beyond. Because if it's worth, is $1,000 extra worth it so that you don't have to deal with this employee down the road? Just something to think about.